I've made several attempts to do a video reply to the short series of video replies that went around talking about paradigm shifts in gaming. And I'm not quite sure why it has been difficult. One clip that pretty much got out everything I wanted to say was spoiled by street noise. Those walk and talk videos don't always work out, and this was one case where it was too hard to hear, so I had to do it again, which wasn't satisfying, and yada yada yada. So I've let some time pass, and we'll try again to do a belated video response to a topic I quite enjoy thinking about. So, paradigm shifts in gaming. Now, some of the clips that I watched looked at this question as being a shift in how you play, and they seem to be quite permanent in nature. You used to play one way and then learned something or were taught something or experienced something, and as a result of that experience moved on to a different type of gaming and never went back. And some of the clips seem to approach it from the point of view of a continuous process of change tied to the games that you were playing, and playing those games, of course, the experience is different from the previous games, and treating that like a paradigm shift, which is not a permanent change of state. It's a playing this way, then playing that way, and maybe going back to a previous style later on. Now, when I think about a paradigm shift, what I think about in my gaming history is the attitudes I held toward running the game. Like, not my enjoyment of the game or not what I was getting out of the game or what I felt I should get out of the game, but a paradigm shift in how I run and play the game. The implementation of the mechanics and how that contributes to creating the fiction in the context of the game. So that's the baseline of the clip. So in the beginning, my first paradigm of gaming was, of course, all trial and error, right? I had never played a game before, and I was taught how to play by someone who was pretty new to the game, who had been taught by people who had taught themselves how to play. And it was early days. There were very limited means of access to anybody writing about the hobby in that way. You had the rules, you had the people that you played with, and pretty much that was it until you stumbled across things like Dragon Magazine. So that first paradigm is pretty much, as a 13-year-old, how I interpreted what I was being taught and what I was reading in the different versions of the basic rules that we had at that time. You might think that the first paradigm shift for me would have happened when I stopped playing Dungeons and Dragons and started playing other games, started exploring other games. But this is not actually true. The first paradigm shift happened earlier. So basically, as we were playing, we were moving from learning the rules to playing with the rules, if you see the distinction. So we started to understand how the rules interacted, or at least our understanding of the rules interacted with each other, and we started to make adjustments. And one of the adjustments that we made really was, maybe it happens to a lot of other gamers. We started to think that you should roll for everything. No assumption of ability on the part of the character. The dice were there to determine the outcome of results, so let's use them for everything. All right. So this is one pretty extreme shift. And of course, it didn't apply to walking across the room or whatever. But the idea was that the dice should be there to account for what your character did, successfully or unsuccessfully. So we were looking at new systems. And maybe if you think back, if you're old enough or you have a good enough collection, there are early Dragon magazines that talk about things like jumping distance and stuff like this. I mean, the simulation movement, a rule for every possible situation kind of movement. That was the kind of thing that was going on with us. We had this basic framework of rules within the game, and we wanted to build on it. It said basic, you know, so it implied that there was more out there. And as we shifted to advanced, we were not discouraged really from this attitude. The idea was that there would be systems, or you were empowered to make new systems to handle whatever it is you needed to handle, as long as you were doing it fairly and consistently. It was like an intellectual challenge, and the reward was coming up with a good rule that solved a problem that other people wanted to use, that sort of thing. So the byproduct of all of that was this first paradigm shift. Roll dice all the time. So maybe that's the end point of my introductory paradigm, right? I learned how to play, and the end result of learning how to play was use dice all the time. So the first shift comes, and it was pretty extreme. We really liked playing, but, couldn't get together with a regular group. The groups were always changing, and times were always changing, and that sort of thing. So one time period that I could count on was walking to and from school. And one of the guys that I played with most of the time, we shared most of that walk together. And so we devised our own game, which was a diceless game. It, much like any other diceless game, was about bidding and comparing ratings and that sort of thing. But basically, it was, we understand how role-playing games work now. We understand what the dice do, but let's move beyond that and focus on this other side, right? Because sometimes the dice keep you from completing the module, right? You can't open the door, you can't find the secret passage or whatever. That's what the dice determined. At that time, you didn't succeed. And so the story was different. So we were getting into the idea of sharing everything that had been designed. And I mean, this is an understandable temptation. You worked really hard making a country or a nation or a world or a dungeon or a temple or whatever, and you wanted the people that you expected to play in it to get to see all of it. But the thing that would get in the way of that was the dice. Now, my idea about the dice would change really, really quickly, because once we started playing with this diceless system, we soon lost interest. Not because diceless systems are bad, but our goal for designing this system was to be able to translate all the fun and excitement and mystery and discovery of role-playing games, which is why we got into them in the first place, and take them into a portable format that didn't require any stuff. But once we had done that, we had moved from rolling for everything to rolling for nothing. Major paradigm shift. And rolling for nothing meant really that the stories became predictable. Right? You're going to succeed until you don't succeed. You're not going to succeed at some dramatic moment, but then there'll be a reversal and blah, 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 blah. I mean, it was just like watching television. You could predict from the opening credits what the end was going to be like. You never really felt that the hero was ever in any jeopardy, which meant there was no risk, which meant it just all falls apart. So while I understand story gaming, it's not for me. And this period of rolling for nothing showed me a lot about my own instincts, impulses, and reactions to gaming. So this is what I think of as a paradigm. It starts in one place, finishes in another place, and your perspective about how to actually run the game changes in some fundamental way. So I had gone from rolling for everything to rolling for nothing, and then shifted to something new. After I had left Dungeons & Dragons behind and started exploring other things, one new element entered gaming. So in the beginning, we all owned the rules. We all read the rules. Very few people actually owned modules, and then, you'd play through them, and then you'd kind of change places and make some changes. But we all read the same. We all read the same stuff. We all came from the same place. We all had the same understanding of the world, and we were really all equal. Right. In my very second session of Dungeons and Dragons, I was the game master. I mean, so I'd done one stint as a player, and then I was a game master, and then I was a player, and then there were some solo modules that you could do. So I was both the player and the game master, and stuff like that. So we were all equal. We all had equivalent knowledge. We didn't all have equivalent understanding or equivalent passion or things like that, but the game master wasn't in a position where they had to teach anybody anything, right? But once you open yourselves up to playing new games, and one guy in your group buys Top Secret, and another guy in your group buys Champions, and another guy in your group, buys Paranoia, and on and on and on, then that's the only copy of the rules that you might see for years, until you get a chance to make it to a game store, and maybe they have it and maybe they don't, and maybe you're going to be excited about something else like Cyberpunk 2013 or 2020 or whatever, or Shadowrun, or Call of Cthulhu, and you'll buy that. And so the game master suddenly is the guy that owns the book, the guy that has read the whole book, the guy that's persuading everyone to try the game, explaining the game, then teaching the mechanic, then setting the mood, building the world, sharing that world, and nobody else knows any of this stuff. Right? So this was the new element that had been introduced. It didn't exist when I was learning how to play. All right? We all knew all the same stuff when I was learning how to play. We all knew nothing, then we all knew more, then we all knew more, and on and on and on and on. But this exploratory period, which happened when I hit college, this period was one of great discovery, high-speed discovery, because one week we'd play one game, the next week we'd play another, and we'd keep experimenting until we found one that stuck, we got really excited about, then we'd play it until the end of a campaign or a story, a few months, a couple of weeks, something like that, and then move on to the next thing. Or we'd, say, screw exams, let's run multiple games. But, the thing was that the game master suddenly had all of these new responsibilities, and those responsibilities translated in some way into power. And I'm not talking about the abusive GM. I mean that the only way that everybody at the table would know the same stuff is if it was channeled through the game master. We had less time. We had fewer resources. We were interested in playing many different games, and so rather than all clustering around, the Call of Cthulhu rulebook and all reading it and spoiling all the surprises, right? Because this was also, getting into mystery and investigation-based gaming rather than adventure-based gaming all at the same time. There's so many different genre and mechanical and background and elements being added in to the gaming experience, that things changed very rapidly for us. And so you became an authority on the games that you owned, and you became the go-to person for that game. This was something we hadn't experienced before. So the paradigm shift here is kind of strange. It's who owns the game. And what our environment was teaching was that you were playing in the game master's game. My paradigm shift during this period was that I was less satisfied. I had a similar kind of reaction to this that I had during my diceless period. The stories didn't feel the same because the only imagination that counted was mine, and I was the only one who had the whole picture, right? And I didn't need the players for that. I could be writing fiction for that experience, right? Even though the players are rolling dice and the players are making the decisions, the collaborative, imaginative experience really felt limited just to me. And I'm sure that that's what the experience was like for them, except it would be foggier for them because they had to verify details through me. Now, the longer we played a game, the better my experience got. And we wanted to have longer campaigns. We wanted to really get good at these games. But the temptation to play new games was also very strong. And we were all game masters. And so, of course, we all wanted to run games. And there's only so many days in the week, and there's only so many hours. And so we would shift from Palladium Fantasy to Beyond the Supernatural to Call of Cthulhu to, whatever happened to be next. And so we were often pushed back into the situation with the game master as authority over the imaginative construct. And this was something that would plague me for a long time. I got used to the idea of my imagination being the only one in the room. I got used to having that level of control over the narrative. I had never had it before. And then I got forced into having it by circumstance, and some aspects of story play got better. The dice were still present. Player agency was still present. But one person was controlling how the narrative was described and interpreted, meaning that more people at the table had a clear picture of what was going on. The guy over here who's barely paying attention could be reminded of what's really going on just by the game master's description, rather than being allowed to create his own representation of the world and nobody at the table understanding why they can't figure out what's going on, right? That problem of very open play, of course, vanishes when you've got this central clearinghouse of narration, right? Mysteries often run better in this format. So the paradigm shift here was semi-conscious. And until the end, when I recognized that games were flowing better, and if I could find a group that wanted to play one game long term, then it got as good as it used to be in the early days. So that's where the temptation came in. So all this period is during the White Wolf games. So I got the book telling me I should be an authority, really. It's calling me a storyteller, talking about me writing stories, scripting things so they end in chapters and scenes and chronicles, and talking about these arcs and hitting me over the head with a meta plot that, all the players wanted to find out about. So again, forcing me to disseminate my vision of the world onto them. This was a period of great struggle because I didn't want that. And I knew that I didn't want that. But at the same time, circumstance and the games I was playing were telling me it's okay. So that paradigm shift was, whose game is it? The paradigm shift that followed was pretty much a reaction to the previous one. The whose game is it, right? This game is my game, which I shall teach and share with you, the players, who will thrill to the power of and beauty of my imagination and the magnificence of my words, all that crap. I went the other way. This was a very conscious decision. Instead of using my talents, such as they are, to build stories about those characters based on what I knew about these players to give maximum satisfaction and that cool factor and all the things that I'm supposed to be doing as a game master in that paradigm. I said, enough of this, because again, the thrill was gone for me. The only thing that I could really enjoy there was being successful as a storyteller. But that wasn't why I was playing the game. So I needed to do something else. And I don't blame the game. I can play those games now the way that I like to play. But at the time, there's just too many things going on. I was learning too much at the time to really see what was happening. But I knew that I had to get away. So instead of all of this heavy prep, I thought I would rather enjoy myself in what is now called lazy GMing. And lazy GMing is really the seat of the pants style. So instead of these richly detailed worlds planned in advance and these story threads plotted meticulously to impact the heartstrings of that player and motivate this character and surprise everybody with this or that revelation or capture the imagination, that kind of stuff. Instead of doing that, I would make it look like I was doing that. So starts with minimal prep, enough to get one session going, and then based on what the players say and do and think and how they react, you are, by the seat of your pants, on the fly, creating the world around them. And the major challenge is, as the sessions pile up, keeping all of this consistent. This is by far one of the hardest challenges that a game master can have, especially if they're willing to let the dice do their job, right? If you're not fudging anything, then games can go in wild directions that you could never have predicted, right? And your job is to make it look like the world is consistent and player decision isn't creating outcomes, that player decisions are choices between existing outcomes, right? So this is great, sort of, except that, again, if you're just making it up, then why are you bothering to roll dice? If you're just making it up, why bother making any decisions, right? This brings us into that whole quantum ogre thing. Of course, it's not really a quantum ogre, but that's neither here nor there. If it doesn't matter what's behind the door, then it doesn't matter going through the door, right? Again, this leads us right back to the story gaming that isn't satisfying for me. And, if one person in your group is not satisfied, it has an effect. And if that person is the game master, and if the group is looking at the game master as some kind of lead in the group exercise, and they're not satisfied, then this game will not be fun. So while the challenge of doing that was very thrilling and rewarding and all of that stuff, again, the payoffs that I was looking for and the payoffs I wanted to deliver were not there, because really none of the accomplishments were as real as they could have been had the people that they were meeting and the places that they were going and the problems that they were solving, had they been established before play, right? So this paradigm shift was passing through the reaction phase to being a storyteller, the storytelling paradigm, moving through the adjudicator paradigm. That's all you're really doing. Or I guess you could say the fabricator, the fabricating adjudicator paradigm. where you're making it all up. You're making it all up as you go along, and you're just there to interpret information from the group and provide responses from the system or from your imagination. And this didn't do it for me either, and brought me to where I am now. Another conscious paradigm shift. This last shift I really think of just as know thyself, right? My paradigm of gaming now is to know what I want, to know what I can deliver, and then to extend that out to my group. Who am I playing with? What kind of game works for us, right? There are some people that I would love to play Star Wars with, and there are some people that I don't want to play Star Wars with. I really want to play Nephilim with. You know what I mean? Not that these two groups can't play Star Wars or can't play, Nephilim or some kind of occult investigation game, but it's just that they're really good at it. Right? So what is it about this group, right, that makes this group special? What games do I want to play with this group? What games should I be running with this group? What kind of character should we be playing? Know thyself. Taking that to the next level is understanding the game and running it the way it needs to be run for that group. And I'm not really talking about house ruling, because I pretty much believe in running the rules as written. But the rules as written don't cover everything, and they certainly aren't telling me how to role play. We've discussed this before. There's tons and tons of game master advice, but there's not a lot of advice for players. And the game master is one player among many. So this final paradigm shift is really about exploration, opening yourself up to learning new things, to increase your enjoyment, to make sure the game goes on, the group survives, everybody enjoys it, wants to do it, on and on and on, week after week. And it's the most satisfying period of gaming that I've had since the early days. There are lots of great games that have happened throughout all the years that I've been playing. But that early period where it was all new, right? That special excitement of discovery, that has come back to me 30 years later. I don't get to play very much, and I've learned new ways. I've explored new ways of making sure that I can play, even though I don't know any gamers to play face-to-face with here in the city that I'm living in, and my schedule makes it difficult to interact with them face-to-face. But I do have people that I can play with online in Hangouts. I have people that I can play with online in Play by Email. I have people I can play with in forums. And I'm doing all of these things actively now. I am in a forum game, learning how to play Torg. I'm in a Hangouts game, running RuneQuest. I'm in another Play by Email game with old dear friends playing A Time of War, Mech Warrior, one of my favorite games of all time. It's good gaming. Wouldn't have happened if I was not open to being honest with what I like, what I want from a game, exploring the games that are out there and finding the ones that work with my group, finding the technologies that allow me to play them even if I'm isolated. It's a great paradigm of gaming. I don't know if I will have another shift. And in the past, I didn't know either. So we'll see what happens in the future. But for right now, this is my video response to paradigm shifts in role-playing. Fantastic question. Thank you for asking. I'm sorry it took me so long to get involved.